Welcome to Layer the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. On today's episode, let's discuss Rush's 1982 album, Signals. I haven't made many videos on Rush. In fact, I haven't made any videos on any Rush albums. The only Rush video I've made was a Why Rush Rules video quite a while ago. I'm actually a very big fan of the band, and I've been planning on doing a milestone moment either on 2112 or Moving Pictures or both those albums. But I had just been listening a lot to Signals the last couple of days, and it was sort of in my head, and I just felt like I wanted to make a video on this album because it's kind of an interesting album. It's for a lot of Rush fans, it's a turning point. And I think a lot of times Rush fans are divided by Signals as sort of that middle point where you're either like Signals and before, or you're a pre-Signals or a post-Signals Rush fan in some ways. For some people, there are some people that like all eras of the band. But for me personally, Signals was kind of like a change for me. And although I do really like this record and I like Grace Under Pressure after this, it was sort of a change and a feeling like a little bit of a step down for me as far as the albums that I liked from Rush. I'm a big fan of the '70s era stuff. I love Moving Pictures and Permanent Ways, Farewell to Kings. All those albums are just great. So I lean more towards the '70s Moving Pictures. I'm sort of a pre-Signals guy, if you will. Although, like I said, I do really like this album. So the album follows Moving Pictures, which was Rush's biggest album up to that point, maybe one of their biggest album of all time. And they after Moving Pictures, they had released Exit Stage Left. And Rush would set up a pattern here where their live albums tended to bookmark an end of a particular chapter, and then they would move on to sort of a slightly new sound or new direction a little bit. And they do the same thing here. And that new direction is keyboards, more keyboards. And this is where Rush fans usually get divided. You're either okay with the keyboards, or the more keyboards, the less you like the albums. And it's not that Rush wasn't using keyboards before this. There's actually quite a bit of keyboards on like Moving Pictures and Permanent Waves. It started to use the keyboards more. But here, the keyboards really start taking a dominant role, and they start moving into the territory of the guitar, if you will. They start taking over where there might have been a guitar riff. Now there's a keyboard riff. And the other thing for me is that the keyboard sounds that they were using before this, to my ears, now I'm not a keyboard player and I don't really know the electronic side of this, how to describe this, but the '70s and Moving Pictures keyboard sounds to me were more of an analog synth sound, or a Moog synth. That was a type of synthesizer, like when you hear Xanadu or the beginning of Tom Sawyer, the keyboard sounds in that. And here with Signals and On, the keyboards would take on a more synthesizer sound. And the keys on this album have a very kind of lush, warm, they're not aggressive at all in any way. They're more like pads, like they fill out the sound. And there are times where the keyboard does carry the riff, like the beginning of Subdivisions. But on a lot of this records, the keyboards are just sort of textural things that just sort of come in and they sort of lift up the sound a little bit. And the keyboard sounds in general are these more subdued, kind of soft sounds. I don't really know how else to describe it, but at least that's the way I hear it to my ear. And, they were maybe moving in this direction. If you listen to side 2 of Moving Pictures, The Camera Eye, Witch Hunt, but here there just seems to be a shift on Signals where the synthesizers start taking on a different role than they did before this. The album is produced by Terry Brown, and Terry Brown had produced a a bunch of the other Rush albums before this. They had a long running relationship with Terry Brown, and this would be the last album that he worked with the band, or he would leave after this. But the production on this album, it's good. To me, it sort of reflects the keyboard sound, sort of affects the whole mix of the whole record. The record has a really like mellow, soft sound to me. It doesn't have a lot of high end to the sound. It's a very sort of rolled off on the top end. You could say it's warm. It's not an aggressive sound in any way. The drums are a little bit far back for me on this album. They're not as quite as up there as they were on like Moving Pictures or Permanent Waves. And we've talked about the keyboards, and the keyboards here sort of, for me, move a lot into the sonic space where the guitar was. And Alex Lifeson, who I think is a really great guitar player and a very underrated guitar player, he also starts changing, for me, his style, the way he plays his chords, or starts, his sound isn't as distorted. It's a little more reverbed out, a little more like jangly, playing chord notes. There's like no songs on here really that are driven by the riff. For instance, like Limelight. Limelight opens with a guitar riff, or Tom Sawyer, do 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 da, that kind of thing. There's really nothing on this record that's like that. And there are some moments where the guitar does take some nice leads, and there are some, riffs here and there, but the guitar is very subdued, and he would keep going in that direction. The band would, where the keyboards would really take over a lot of the sonic space. Alex Lifeson's guitar would get more and more kind of cleaner and more reverbed out, and sort of these echoey, like, it makes me think of the Police, like the way the guitar was used in the Police, where it's a lot of like clean chords with reverbs and echoes on it and stuff like that. And again, that's also, I think, where or sometimes divides the fans. If you're somebody like me that likes heavy riffing and stuff like that, and you think back to the early Rush stuff like 2112 and Anthem and stuff, songs like that, where the guitar is really, driving. It's distorted. It's right there. It's carrying the riff. Here, the guitar becomes more of an accompaniment, if you will. But overall, there's nothing wrong with the mix. It's just to me, as I was listening to it, I found it just a little sort of pulled back, soft, pillowy, if you will. I don't know, just hard for me to describe. So, of course, the playing on the record is great from everybody. Alex, even though he's a little more subdued on this, he's still got some really nice guitar stuff. Geddy Lee has some really, really great bass playing on this. Like, I do think this is really cool when the keyboard is sort of playing, and then when the bass comes in, it really sort of gives it a different feel. And to me, it's exciting. I love when the keyboards are sort of playing, and then Geddy comes in with like an aggressive bass thing, like in Subdivisions. You hear him do these big bass fills, right before the chorus of the song comes in. And, the Subdivisions is a good example. They're just sort of right out of the gate, like, okay, this is the new direction here. The synth is carrying the lead here. It's these lush synth lines sort of filling out the sound. Analog Kid, that's a cool one. It's a really upbeat one that reminds me a little bit of Red Barchetta, the upbeat part of Red Barchetta. And this is a good example of when the chorus kicks in a song, all these sort of synths come in. And as I was listening to the vinyl, it was like really like the bottom end really sort of lifts up, and the sound opens up with all these keyboards, which is kind of cool. Chemistry is a neat one. Digital Man, I like. It's got like, it breaks into like this reggae feel for a part there that's kind of cool. And that one has a ton of like bass in it, man. It's almost like a lead bass thing. He's like almost playing like a bass solo through like big chunks of that song. Side 2 has The Weapon, which is part 2 of the Fear trilogy, I think. I think there was one more after this. New World Man, which was another. Subdivisions was sort of I would say the most popular song from this. New World Man, I believe, was the other single, and it's a catchy one. This album in general, it doesn't it doesn't have the immediately likable songs like the way Moving Pictures did, like Tom Sawyer and Limelight and Red Barchetta, the way those songs just sort of jump right out at you, very hooky, grab you right away. This album didn't have a whole lot of that. You know, I would say Subdivisions, New World Man is really kind of catchy. And this is another example of where like the beginning keyboard thing at the beginning of this makes it sounds like a sequencer. If you don't know what a sequencer, it's like a programmed synthesizer. You press a button and it loops this particular line. I don't know if that's what it was, but it has a real robotic sound to it, and something that they would get into more as time went on. They would use just more and more synthesizers. And there's even moments on this record where the drums are really pulled back, and the way they're mixed, it almost sounds like the drums are electronic at times. And again, the band would keep moving in that direction where Neil's drum sound, to my ears at least, would get more electronic sounding, but here there's still a lot of great drumming on it. There's still a lot of really cool stuff on it. Losing It is an interesting ballad, lots of keyboards in it. Again, this is like, it just sounds like it was written around the keyboards, so that's kind of interesting and foreshadows maybe where the direction that they would be going. The album ends with Countdown, which is kind of fun, like a thing about the space shuttles, spacecraft launching and everything. It's got a lot of like spoken word things. NASA, which I believe they got permission to use actual, dialogue from the guys in the control room at NASA, I believe is how that story went. So it's a cool one. So, Signals, it's an interesting album. It's for me, it's an album that I like, but it was the beginning of me drifting away from Rush, if you want to put it that way. I did like Grace Under Pressure after this, but for me, it just sort of felt like Signals felt like a little bit of a step down. Grace Under Pressure was another step down. And then honestly, I really started to lose track of Rush. I got Power Windows, and then that was really the last Rush album that I bought like when it came out. But Signals is really for me where I just sort of draw a line here with them moving in a different direction, and where I separate the two. So let me know in the comments what you guys think of the Signals album. Are there fans out there? Let me know if you are a fan who actually likes Signals and On, because I'll be honest with you, I've never met everybody that I know, and maybe it's an age thing, most of the people around my age, they prefer the 70s, the Signals and before era of the band. So is there anybody out there that likes Signals and later? And sometimes I run into Rush fans and they'll say, I like all eras of bands, I love all the albums, they're all equal to me. And I say, okay, well, if, let's say, Rush was playing 2 nights in your town and you could only go to one show, and one show they were going to play all early stuff before Signals, and another show they were going to play only stuff after Signals, what show would you go to if you could only go to one? And everybody always says, I'd want to hear the early stuff, And when you see them live, and I know Rush have some of the most dedicated fans that do stick with them and follow all their albums, but when you see them live, in my opinion, when they play the old stuff, that's what gets the most, that's when people go the most crazy, when they play Limelight or Spirit of the Radio or Free Will and stuff like that. So let me know in the comments. Let me know what you think of Signals. Let me know where you stand with Rush. Are you somebody that likes all their albums? Which era of Rush do you prefer? Let me know in the comments down below. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. And remember to rock hard, ride free.